Hello and welcome to the Storytelling for the Soul podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Kanata, and this is the place we talk about all things expressive writing and other creative techniques, all with a little bit of Buffy the Vampire Slayer thrown in. Buckle up and enjoy. Hello and welcome back to another episode. If you are watching or listening to this in real time, I hope your 2026 has started well. If you're not, I hope you are doing exceptionally well. I'm not going to lie, I'm terribly out of routine at the moment. Main reason being I'm not actually back at work until later in January. Yes, I do have a full-time job, and I do also work on Storytelling for the Soul at the same time. And to be honest with you, given what I'm seeing at the moment, my website is popping, my Pinterest account is popping, so I feel like I'm very much living my dream with Storytelling for the Soul because you're reading my content. And there is very definitely an interest in journaling at the start of 2026, which just makes me so happy. So thank you so much for your support. And please, I know that at the start of a new year, we all make resolutions and have goals, and maybe one of yours was to journal consistently, but stick around because I'm here to help you to maintain that habit. Now, like I mentioned, I am terribly out of routine at the moment. I think this is the third week of my holidays, something along those lines. And wow, it's just a lot of time to fill, which I'm actually really loving, to be honest with you. At the end of the day, I love going to the gym, I love walking, but there's only so much time that I can spend doing those two things. I've been working on a bunch of content. I've got content scheduled into February. I'll finish off another article today. I'll be continuing to pin on Pinterest. That's probably going to be my main platform in 2026. So if you're on Pinterest, check out my content. But the reason that I'm going through this is because inevitably I am left with so much space and time that I usually don't have when I'm working, because I'm working. And then outside of work, of course, I've got to do all the adult things we all have to do: cleaning, cooking, shopping, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, Storytelling for the Soul as well. So my general life doesn't really leave me with much space and free time. But in the pauses, in the silence, even while watching a bunch of YouTube content, which I am framing for myself as research for upcoming articles, but also just for pure enjoyment and interest on my part, I think one thing I really need to get a lot better at is resting fun and doing things without a specific purpose attached. And maybe you can relate to that as well. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. Next Level Soul podcast has become one of my favorites alongside Diary of a CEO and Mayim Bialik. I've probably really mucked up that last name there, but her breakdown podcast is fantastic, one of my favorites. I am very likely going to do an article dedicated to my top breakdown podcasts very, very soon, because there's just so... One thing that I've really gathered during this period is how spoiled for free content we actually are. But the reason that I bring up Next Level Soul podcast with Alex Ferrari is because that has very fast become one of my favorite podcasts. And recently, there was an exceptional discussion with a man named Panache Desai. I'm sorry if I've botched up that name as well. You may have heard of him, but I think a couple of years ago, he might have done a Super Soul podcast episode with Oprah. So lots of people might have heard of him at that point. I hadn't until I'd listened to this podcast. Now, I'm not going to say that I agree with 100% of what was discussed on this podcast, because I don't. And there's definitely the conversation around free will and everything being predetermined that I'm not quite sold on. But Panache at one point does talk about acceptance, which I want to riff off in this podcast, because anyone who's been following my work for quite some time, hopefully by now you know that I don't just teach standard journaling. I have nothing against standard journaling, for the record. I have nothing against people brain dumping if that is what helps them most and that's what they find themselves doing and able to be consistent with. However, I don't feel like that approach to journaling actually maximizes its benefits, and it just leaves so many gains on the table. So I'm actually an embodied processing practitioner. Now, embodied processing is a body-based approach to working with trauma. And I've done that certification through the Scent of Healing. A couple of years ago now, I've been weaving in the techniques. Both I've used them with myself and with clients, and it's been a real game changer. Now, in this podcast, Panache talks about acceptance. And I thought it was a really interesting way to look and apply that methodology to everything that we do. And it got me to thinking that the trauma space often speaks a lot in a way, and it's around marketing, and I totally get it, but it implies that we are not whole. It implies that we are broken, that we have something to fix. I actually don't believe any of that, to be honest with you. I don't believe any of us are broken. I believe often what happens is that we have experiences. Society tells us quite often from a young age who we are meant to be, and across the span of a lifetime, that sticks. And then we start wearing a mask. We start really not being who we are. And I think that's really where people's problems begin, for lack of a better term. I don't necessarily like the term problems, but I'll use it. And I do think sometimes language is a barrier because people do interpret words differently. But after listening to Panache and his views on acceptance and accepting ourselves 100% as we are, I thought, wow, this gives me a whole new angle to borrow and apply to the way that I teach journaling. Because I've never quite liked the angle of journaling to fix yourself, because I don't believe you're broken. So that doesn't work for me. But what if we use journaling and writing through the lens of acceptance and coming back to ourselves, coming back to who we really are? Writing and journaling about the things that we enjoyed most as a kid. Accepting the things that have happened to us, accepting them, and knowing that, okay, we might not have interpreted those things as positive. They may have taken us time to work through, but they're part of why we are who we are. Acceptance. And my understanding of acceptance is not surrender. To me, that's a very different thing. Acceptance is knowing that things have happened, taking the learnings, leaving the reality on the table that we can't change anything that we've interpreted as an unpleasant experience. It's not like, it doesn't matter how much journaling we do, we're not going to be able to go back to a time and a place in our lives and take something back. Unfortunately, that's not how this works. So I guess I'm not really selling a sexy message here, and I often don't sell a sexy message, but I like to think that I sell something that is maintainable, real, honest, transparent. So I think what I'll be doing moving forward in 2026, when I am writing about journaling, and you might have noticed that my content has got a lot more varied recently because I am leaning into my love of writing and journaling. And like you, I don't just like the one thing. I don't just like reading. I don't just like writing. I like a multitude of things. I like gym, strength training. I like walking. I like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I like watching movies. I love animation. So I want to really bring more of myself into my website, and I hope that if we have shared interests, you'll read that content as well. But in terms of what I teach through embodied journaling or embodied writing or diary writing, I do not care what you call it. I really want to lean into encouraging you to accept yourself 100% as you are. I know that the world is not an easy place to live in if you are different. Trust me, I'm living it. It's not easy if you're different, but wearing the mask, being someone you're not, is not going to get you any closer to being happy or content. So moving forward, I am going to be weaving this acceptance message into more of my content. So I hope you'll stick around for that. I hope you'll keep on journaling beyond January. And most of all, thank you so much for your support, because to be honest with you, the analytics that I'm seeing, which tells me if you're actually consuming my content, I'm absolutely floored by them, and I'm looking forward to an exceptional 2026, and I hope that you will join me for the rest of the year. I'm going to leave it there. Have an amazing day and week ahead, wherever in the world you are listening or watching this from.